tonight's guest is George Barris, king of customizers. You know, if you don't have any idea who George is, just let me give you a little idea. There's probably not a car on TV that you've seen in a TV show that hasn't been touched by George Barris. You know, George got his first big TV car was the Batmobile. You know, George is just an amazing guy, and what I really love about hanging out with George and talking to George is here's a guy, you know, he's 81 now, and he just has this rich history. He's been around some of the seminal figures in the automotive industry, and how many guys get to, almost like my interview with Bruce Myers. Here's a guy who, you know, Bruce has the forever will be known as the father of the dune buggy. He's the guy who built an entire part of our industry effortlessly, and he gets credit for that forever. And George, same thing, you know, a car customizer extraordinaire. He has the benefit, the distinction of being a guy that created a entire part of our industry. Now, I caught up with George at Mid-America Motor Works Corvette Funfest. You know, they hold a VW Funfest, and they also have a Corvette Funfest. Corvette Funfest, 15,000 cars, about 50,000 spectators. They brought George in as a guest of honor, and I got to spend the entire day with him, just chatting and you know, talking about his career and his life and his history, and I did a lot of this for the Napa channel. So to get some of this stuff, you're going to have to watch the Napa channel, which is going to be available at thenapachannel.com here very shortly. But this is stuff that I specifically recorded and talked to him about for Volkscast. And we started with Death Race 2000. Death Race 2000, David Carradine, Sylvester Stallone. You remember the Corvette that they had in that movie? You know, they call it the alligator car. George designed that car, and if you look in the show notes, you'll see a cool picture of the car. Well, what you're looking at is a car that's in Mike Yeager, the chief cheerleader of Mid-America Motor Works. You're looking at a car that's in his private collection, and it's this Corvette from Death Race 2000. But this particular car that you're looking at is more VW than it is Corvette. That whole top, the body, the teeth, that big plastic motor hanging out the back, that's all fake. Everything else underneath it, suspension and all that, is all VW. So George and I sat down, and I asked him about the car from Death Race 2000 and asked him about using VWs in TV.
Basically, the film cars were all was VWs. We built all the Death Race 2000 cars, the alligator car, the machine gun car, which Stallone drove, and the various cars were made out of basic VWs. It was all sculptured bodies. We worked an awful lot with VWs because it was easy to make a body onto a platform, number one. Number two, power was in the back, very small. So you can sculpture. All my Power Ranger cars were VW because we were able to build all the cars, put them on VW platforms immediately with a whole body without getting into an awful lot of work. Sometime if they needed power, we would put in a Porsche engine when we needed more power. And the first story about the Love Bug or the Herbie was when they first came to me from Disney. I brought in an Opel GT because I was working with General Motors, and Opel was General Motors from Germany. Right. And of course we had a VW there, and we had some other cars I don't remember. But immediately as we went casting through, the VW had to be the Love Bug, had to be the Herbie from then on. Right. And then from there we carried on to more different shows, and then of course the latest one, they built 53 cars because the PR department said, we want to build 53 cars because they had 53 on the side of the automobile. Wow. So that was one of the characteristics that they used for promoting the film. Of course, the James Dean movie we did, not Rebel Without a Cause, but Drive Fast, Die Young. We had Casper Van Dien, Robert Mitchum, Kerry Mitchum, we use a VW chassis. We pumped in a Porsche engine, and we sealed all the doors because doing the stunts, we didn't want to have to where the door would pop open. My little T dune buggies I made were all VWs. I had 3 or 4 different versions of that: C-cab, roadsters, coupes, and they were all VW chassis because, again, it was an easy modification that you can make all your cars from.
So now this is an interesting thing. When I say George has touched just about everything in the automotive world, here we're talking about his dune buggies. And now, like I said, we were taping at the time for the Napa channel. So we took a quick break to change tapes. And this is before we actually started to get back to our Napa channel interview. We were talking about Bruce Myers. And George had some really cool things to say about Bruce.
But I guess, used to go, growing up in California, the big thing was to take VWs and just take the body off and drive them around. And he thought, that needed some sort of form around it. That's kind of how he came up with
driving just the chassis around, of course, wasn't street legal to a certain point. You had to have something that represented taillights and headlights and directional signals and windshields and windshield wipers and things like that. So you had to go a little bit beyond just having a platform that was going to be street legal unless you wanted to just drive at different events.
Right.
So I say that he contributed to the pioneering to the next level of what he did with the VW chassis and putting a body on them that was more like a dune buggy or something you can run in and out of the sand with or up and down the mountains with and have enough power to be able to do it in the dunes. And so that's where I think he got inspired, but we get it into that other level of making it more of a production and affordable.
I would argue the interesting thing I thought was interesting about the Myers mags is nothing conveys freedom and the sun more than that design. That car is instantly recognizable as kind of this, vehicle for freedom, and it's somewhere out away from everybody else.
Well, it was not a high-style car like a Corvette.
Right, absolutely.
I mean, the styling was really kind of off the wall, but it was still
utilitarian.
It was a kind of a feeling that I thought that kids that were down at the dunes and were surfboarders would like to have to run around and get down to the dunes and take their surfboards out and go out and do something. And ours was the opposite. I went to the hot rod end of it,
right,
making the T-buggies. If you couldn't get a T-body, well, we'd make T-dune buggies. But then I made different characters. I had the convertible, I had the C-cab, I had the coupe. Each one was a different part of that inspiration that I had, making it a hot rod dune buggy.
See, that's the cool thing about sitting down and chatting with George is that he's just been around for so long and been around such incredible people that either he knows or has an opinion on just about everything, and it makes for a great interview. So, like I said, we were at the Mid-America Motorworks Funfest, and behind us was sitting the car from Death Race 2000. As a matter of fact, if you want to see pictures of this car, go to mamotorworks.com. It's also in the show notes on CalLook. So I started to ask him about the Death Race car.
The car behind us, the Death Race 2000 car, did they give you any guidelines of what they wanted these cars to look like, or did they just say, this is the premise of the movie, go have fun with it?
Well, basically, Roger Corman said, this is the premise of the movie. We want different driving teams that had definition, like the alligator car, like the machine gun car, like the bull car, like every different car was, and we would draw sketches. There was 2 or 3 on the team, as well as the set directors from the film, and we'd all come up with different ideas that made the composite of what each team would have and how it would be. And they brought in a lot of other cars. There were terrorists that were trying to tear up cars.
Right.
And there was a swastika team from Germany, and it was a very entertaining picture.
Now we start getting into one of my favorite parts of the interview, where I start to talk to George about a rumor that I'd heard And you know what? I credit this question to Dave Cormack for bringing it up about the rumor. Well, let's just go to the question.
Yes, now, yeah.
You and I were talking a little bit earlier. I asked you about a rumor that I'd always heard about you, and I needed to know if it was true. That did you invent candy apple paint? You told me not only did that come by accident, but the pearl story is even better. So I need you to tell me both of those stories.
Well, in the mid '40s, a man came to my shop and he says, "I want you to paint my car red, cheap because it's sell better red than white." And he didn't want to go to changing the base tones, so I just went and painted red at DuPont with a toner over the white, and of course it came on because red. A toner is a bleeder anyhow. So, but it was blotchy because it went over a solid white. I said, "Wow, that's really great." So I said, "Good." I run out, got a fender. I sprayed the fender with silver, and then I put the red over it. Oh, wow, that's getting better. So I run to our powder company, got from Gemolite. I got some gold powder, brilliant gold, mixed it in some clear, sprayed that over a fender, and that even made it more punchy. And I said, "Well, now it's deep. It's a deep red. I want to get more of that candy apple that you get at the different fairgrounds and things like that." And that's what inspired me to come up with the candy apple name, was that I then retoned the toners, took the bases, mixed the clear into just at a time when you sprayed it, it had enough transparency, and over the gold powder you can flow it. Right. So we elude the cloud effect. And that's basically how we finally came up with the candy apple red, as well as the name candy apple, coming from the different fairgrounds. I built a car named the Golden Sahara for a man in Dayton, Ohio. It was a wild-looking, made from a Lincoln car. And I wanted a pearl, but I wanted it to be kind of gold, but pearl. Well, you take the white and you put any kind of a toner in it. It wasn't transparent. It was dull, just solid. So I said, "Well, wait a minute. Fish has very scaly looking colors on them." So I run down to the fish market, Shirley and I, and we said, "Let me see sardines and turn them all on their back so I can see their bellies." So they lined up all the different sardines until I find the ones that had a little gold scale to the white scale. So we took those and we scraped them, put them in a jar, run back home, and then I mixed it with a nitrocellulose lacquer, which had a very little gold tint to it anyhow, and then I sprayed it over a flat white. So I got my brilliance coming out of the pearl and the reflection of the depth through that into the white and the gold turner with a clear overlay. Of course, the biggest problem we had is then spraying that, you had to be able to stand the smell. It was a fishy smell. And that's basically how we were able to start that. So I went down to the jewelry market and I got some diamond. And I had them take the diamonds and crush it and put it in a jar the same way and run it back home and put it in with the nitrocellulose glue. And I put the base of the car kind of a goldish bronze. Then I took the diamond dust and I got back and I faded it, let it kind of fall on the car so that the diamond dust would still have the reflections, and then I run over it with the clear, see? And that gave me my first diamond dust, which then went into metal flake. And a great funny story, Chuck Jordan, when he was with Cadillac Division at General Motors, in the 50s, he came out to me and he said, "George, I got to have your candy apple red." He was really a great designer, one of the best. Dave Holes and him, they were a team over there at General Motors. And I said, "But Chuck," I said, "you got to base it, you got to put the gold powder, you got to put the candy red, and you got to put it clear. Now, who can you do that with on manufacturing? You can't. It's unaffordable." So Chuck stuck it out until, like today, look at your glamour colors. I don't care if they're blues, candy greens, candy reds. I mean, they've done it in 2 stages. Boom, your base got all the brilliance, and boom, you're clear over it. So they were able to do that. I found out one thing: if you have a will, there's a way, so make sure you try it.
Now, for this next question, the audio is a little bit different because I was actually interviewing George up on the stage. And interestingly enough, when we're doing the interview for TV, we only have one camera there. So basically what you have to do is you do the interview, the camera focuses on the guy that you're interviewing, and then, my cameraman has us just chatting a little after the interview so that he can take some other shots to intersperse in there. Well, during that portion, I just happened to ask George about Von Dutch. Von Dutch, in the hot rod world, a legend. And George whips out this awesome story about Von Dutch.
Von Dutch was a talent. He was a very eccentric, low-key, absolute opposite of what you expect him. You would think he'd be, as an artist, they'd like to be able to communicate. Total opposite. And when he did a car for me in 1950, he did my company station wagon. So all the gang got together, all those guys, guys would work out and girls would come in, and we had a lot of fun. It was like a party shop. And he starts, I said, I want you to pinstripe the wagon for me. He starts whacking away, a couple of sips of wine, and it goes down. All through the day, we go keep agitating him. All the guys come up and tease him, and he gets around, and about 11 o'clock that night, we said, hey, we're out of here. I mean, you can be, and he was over around the other side. We come back in at 10 o'clock the next morning, and here he was just finishing up in his last glass of wine, still walking. And I looked at everything around the wagon, and I said, hey, Vaughn, what is this? Is all this scribble? He says, that is our activity at Barris Kustoms all day long in a striping form. Who came in, who lifted the weights, what girl came in to kiss this guy, and all the way around he spent that whole 12 hours with the glass of wine, and then off he went. He was really a very, very talented guy.
So there you go.